Go ahead.
Okay, we are on book 2, Sutra 34. It says, when negative thoughts or acts, such as violence, etc., are done, caused to be done, or even approved of, whether incited by greed, anger, or infatuation, whether indulged in with mild, medium, or extreme intensity, they are based on ignorance and bring certain pain. Reflecting upon this is also pratipaksha bhavana. Here, Patanjali gives a further explanation of pratipaksha bhavana. Suppose we bring pain to someone or cause harm to be brought to another. The reactions will come and ultimately result in ignorance and misery. We need not even cause the pain directly for the reaction to occur. We can effect this just by approving of another's pain bearing actions due to our own avariciousness, anger, or ignorance. I'm going to read 35 also. In the presence of one firmly established in nonviolence, all hostilities cease. Starting with this 35th sutra, Patanjali covers the 10 virtues one by one. When the vow of ahimsa is established in someone, all enmity ceases in his or her presence because that person emits harmonious vibrations. If two people who have enmity between them come to such a person, they will temporarily forget. That is the benefit of ahimsa. When it is practiced continuously in thought, word, and deed for some time, the entire personality brings out those vibrations. Even wild animals forget their nature of causing pain in the presence of one established in ahimsa. In ancient Hindu mythology, it states that in the forest where the saints and sages lived practicing ahimsa, the animals would only kill when they were hungry. At other times, a cow and a tiger could drink water side by side. The Buddha cultivated this practice. Wherever he went, he brought peace, harmony, and friendliness. St. Francis is another great example of this. Mahatma Gandhi tried his best to practice and propagate ahimsa, bringing many people together. Of course, there were failures in his efforts, but he would admit, I am still trying. I am still not that perfect. His entire life was based on the vows of ahimsa and satya. Even without obtaining 100% perfection in them, he earned a great name throughout the world as an apostle of peace. Perhaps if Gandhi's practicing had been perfected, his assassin might have forgotten the idea of shooting Gandhi when he came to Gandhi's presence. So even with a little perfection, Gandhi was admired and revered by the entire world. Even a bit of ahimsa is enough to elevate us to a higher state. I'm going to stop there for now. And I didn't catch sadhana yesterday, but I wanted to talk a little bit more about Pratipaksha Bhavana, which I'm sure you guys discussed a little bit already. So I like that in the 34th Sutra, he gives you the fact that like you don't have to be the one performing an act, a greedy act or an angry act or an infatuated act in order to be guilty by association. So if these things are going on around you and you know, for example, there's someone in your life who likes to gossip a lot or, you know, talk shit about people, and they whenever you're in their presence, they decide that that's what they're going to do, and you might not be the person who is initiating that, but if you participate in it, or if you play some kind of vibrational role in that person continuing to do what they are doing, then you're still guilty, that you are still creating ignorance for yourself. And also, I like when he talks about in 35 about vibration. I'll get into that in a second. But I really wanted to talk about that because I think that's something that we sometimes we assume that just because our own intentions are pure, that um, if we're not the one initiating something bad that's happening around us, or something that we perceive um, as wrong happening around us, and we unconsciously or consciously give energy to that thing. So I think talking is definitely a big one that probably all of us at some point have been guilty of. If somebody is talking about someone we don't like or something like that person might be coming to you knowing that they can talk that way. So even if you aren't the one who starts it, if you are still participating in it in any way, then it's still hurting your own growth. And I like the idea of Pratipaksha Bhavana is that it's the practice of cultivating the opposite, right? So for me, this, when I learned this teaching, it was so helpful to me because there are so many like ethereal concepts in these sutras of like what you should be doing, you know, like withdraw your senses and, you know, stuff like that, that can be kind of, you know, like ethereal and confusing. But this is a very specific practice. It says that whenever a thought or a wrong thought arises in your mind, that the practice of cultivating the opposite thought is what can bring you into your state of liberation. So beyond just suffering, or say like, you know, you wake up, you're in a bad mood, or something bad happens to you and you're in a bad mood, and you get, you know, how we kind of spiral in thoughts, right? Like we have one bad thought and it leads to another bad thought, and it just kind of like spirals out of control unless you at some point go in and grab hold of yourself and you try to cultivate the opposite, or you try to, you know, so it's not even the practice of like of always trying to be positive, but it is the practice of trying to return to divine thoughts. And sometimes that doesn't happen. Like you can't go from a really angry thought to just be like, oh, I love this person now. You know, that is sometimes too far of a jump. So cultivating the opposite is kind of just, it's more, to me at least, it's more of like unweaving the thread, like one by one, almost like it's rope, and you just have to, you have to unweave it one by one. Does that make sense? Have you guys had any experiences like this? I know like gossiping is definitely one of them. And yeah, I mean, if you've had like, I hesitate to call anything a negative thought because that's just coloring the thought, but like something that's not adding to your pure state of mind or your peaceful state of mind. If you guys want to share anything about that.
To me, it's awareness. Like awareness in this speaks volume, because if you don't have the awareness, you don't even realize you're doing it. And before I continue, I love the way Sanskrit just rolls out of your mouth like it's English. I would have been so like I grew up in a culture where gossip is the like it's a thing. It's so natural. It sucks. And maybe because it's such a small island and everyone knows each other, and like you fart and everyone knows. So it's even easier. But I didn't realize, like I never realized how bad it was until I moved here. And it was so nice to just, mind you, I moved from there to Manhattan, so it was a complete culture shock. But I left my apartment and no one in my building like really cared or knew what I was doing or whatever. Like, and it started sinking in, right? So that was like a big like eye opener, I guess. And it really had nothing to do with yoga because I wasn't even practicing back then. But it is yoga. And then going through yoga teacher training, ahimsa was so big for me. Like all the yamas and the niyamas were like a big shift. But it made me like the more I committed to it, the more shift there was without effort. I don't know if that makes sense. Like the effort was in ahimsa, not in changing the way I looked at people and things. And like I used to have this long list of people that I hated because they pissed me off here and they hurt me this way. And now I don't have anyone on that list anymore. I have people that I like. I still have people that I don't like, or I don't like what people are doing. It's still there, but the word hate just automatically dropped. And I never planned on, I never sat down and said, okay, I'm going to stop hating what this one's doing. I'm going to stop hating that person for whatever she or he did to me like 100 years ago. it just dissolved. And it's the practice of ahimsa. It shifts everything else. And it's so beautiful.
Yeah, and that's what I love, that they give you concepts like ahimsa to know what your reference point should be, or could be, I guess. And then honestly, the practice of it. So you can hear somebody tell you these things over and over again, and it won't register until you practice it and you see the peace that it brings you for yourself. Like, I remember growing up and going to temple and listening to these teachings, and then right after, like, the aunties from temple would be like talking shit about everyone, like saying and like gossiping. And it was such, especially in the like we went to like temples that were like only my dad's from Trinidad and my mom's from Guyana, so depending on the temple we went to, it was either like all Trinidadian families or all Guyanese families. And each time we would go to the opposite one, they would be like talking about the Guyanese temples and talking about and they were just like, and like so much of it was like that. And I remember like listening to these teachings and thinking like, isn't this the opposite of what we're supposed to be doing right now? But there is a reason why stuff like that happens. People tend to gravitate towards activities. So I wanted to talk about the idea of vibration that he talks about next, and the idea that the thoughts that we have and the actions that we perform have a vibration to them. So a lot of spiritual teachers talk, like we hear about like vibes, like good vibes, and we talk about vibration a lot in these types of communities. But on a scientific level too, like if you think about the water experiment where you play certain tones, and the molecules in the water will arrange themselves into like different fractal patterns. And then you also think about like the music experiments with the plants, and when they play happy music for a plant, that plant grows and flourishes. When you play negative music for that plant, the same plant will die. And the same idea of like talking to your plants and saying kind things to them and watching them grow versus neglecting them, and what happens to them when you do that. So here he talks a little about Patanjali, or Swami Satchidananda talks about the idea that people emit vibrations, so in their thoughts, words, and actions. And that when vibrations are harmonious, that you're creating harmony, not just in yourself, but also in your environment. So he gives that example of the animals, about how they don't naturally tend towards violence when they're not in an environment of violence. And that when they're in an environment of ahimsa, that they will only, feed if they're hungry. So I really like that too, and I want to share my screen with you guys. Hold on, let me see if I could do that. So has anybody heard about have any of you heard of Dr. David Hawkins? He's a scientist and a physician who ended up studying vibrational consciousness. So I'm going to share this.
Did he write Power versus Force?
Yes.
Oh yeah, I have it. Where you do the experiment with the arm, you can tell if someone is lying.
Yes.
Yeah.
He has some really fascinating work out there. But I want to share this one. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is from one of his books. So the scale on the left is a scale of our emotional experiences. And you can also use these to categorize your actions as well, your thoughts, your actions, when they come from one of these places. And it's measured in hertz. So these are actual vibrational frequencies that he, according to this one doctor, that he came up with the scale. So he also talks about how, like in the book, it's actually, I think the book that this one comes from is called Discovery of the Presence of God. But in his book, in this top section where it's like purple up here, he says that that's the place where miracles and synchronicities happen. So have you guys ever experienced that when like you are in a very like a flow state, you would call it, I guess, or I would call it, but when you get into that flow state, how you kind of feel like you're attracting things into your life or people into your life? Yeah. So this is, yeah, he says that in this purple section up here, right where it says flow, that's where you start to get into the vibrational frequency where things start to be attracted to you, or where good things start to be attracted to you. On the opposite side, when you're existing in the suffering and the bottom states, you can also attract, like it's like attracts like. So you will also attract more of the same. But he says it's in the top section where synchronicities. And I think we've all had that experience of like if you're going through something or you're like reading something. For me, it happens a lot with reading. Like I'll read something and then all of a sudden like an example of that thing pops into my life, or somebody else brings it up or something like that. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Sometimes I'll ask for a sign. I'll say, let's say I need answer on a decision. So it's hard to get like a yes or no. So you have to more like be, like you're saying, you have to be in the vibration of the thing. Like if I wanted to move to a bigger apartment, then I start to invoke the feelings of this bigger apartment. Why do I want the bigger apartment? What would it offer me and my family if I was in a bigger apartment? What would we look like? How would we talk to each other? What would my behavior be? And I look at all those things, and then I start to do what I think. I start to act the way I think I would act once I had the thing. And I'll give something really specific, like, you know, ceviche. Ceviche is my clue, is my sign. And if ceviche comes my way, then I know I'm on the right path. And like literally out of nowhere, I could be reading a magazine. The magazine will have a recipe for ceviche. Or I'll walk down, I'll be driving somewhere, or I'll walk somewhere and it'll have a sign that says, we sell ceviche here. And it's like real deal.
No, yeah, it's definitely, I've heard this teaching from many different people. Like I know it's a big thing with Abraham Hicks. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Abraham Hicks.
I love Abraham Hicks. That's ask and it is given. If you like Abraham Hicks, you'll also really love, her name is Shin, Florence Scovel Shin. She's like super, super old, probably from the 1920s. And her book is like, so it's written so old fashioned. You know how sometimes we have issues with this translation of the sutras and we're like, that's so outdated. What an outdated example. All of her examples are like super outdated, but it's all the same. It's all like you be in this vibration of the thing, and then the thing comes to you. I think you'll probably really love Paul Selig too. He's a channeler. Really cool stuff. Thank you for bringing this up.
Yeah. No, I love the vibration talk because it's so real to me. And I just feel like when you can't, if you've ever been in that flow state where you're attracting those things to you, it's so hard to deny it sometimes. Like it's just, it seems. And then, so another thing that I love about that teaching specifically, with Abraham Hicks and with David Hawkins, he says the same thing, that you can't get somewhere or get something by living in the state of its absence. Like you don't reach a state of love by focusing on how much you don't have love in your life. That you have to reach that state within yourself, within your own consciousness, to be able to get to this state on the top of this chart. That you have to, and I think that's what Pratipasha Bhavana is really teaching us, that it's teaching you how to adjust, to not intentionally influence what's happening outside of you, but how to influence what's happening inside of you in order to influence what's happening outside of you. That part has to come first. Does that make sense?
I have a little when we finished yoga teacher training, like going through yoga teacher training, I decided there's no way I'm going back to any corporate events. There's no way I'm going back to trade. Like, there's no way. I'm like, I can't do this. But then on the opposite end, there was all this fear of how am I going to get classes? How am I going to teach? And I had this dream for, I think it was 2 or 3 full weeks. I dreamt about missing a plane, missing a train, like missing some sort of transportation. So of course I looked it up, and it meant that kind of dream means that you feel like you're missing out on opportunities in life. And I don't know what I did or how I did it, but at some point I finally let go of that fear. I stopped having that dream, and within the same week I got offered 2 classes, which I did nothing for, like nothing. A teacher that has nothing to do with Rev was asked to teach somewhere and she couldn't take it. And I used to take her she used to teach at my local library, and she couldn't take it and she just referred me. And that, like, I did absolutely, like, I didn't show up, I didn't call anyone. I showed up in a different way, but and it's been like that, like, with me teaching. And I think that has to do with yoga and Reiki. Like, once I got in that space, it just keeps happening, and I'm super, super grateful for it.
Yeah.
So you know that 100-year-old yogi Tao that recently passed away? So last January I got to go see her, and one of her mantras she shared with me is something I still carry with me. And she's like, people always ask me how I live this long and like what I ate and what yoga I did. And she's like, no, none of that. She said, I wake up every single day and I say, today is going to be the best day of my life. And so whenever, like, with me and my coworkers, like every 5 minutes we'll like be doing that spiral of like, oh, these salespeople, these whatever, and like go down that negative hole. But we'll stop ourselves and we'll be like, today is the best day ever. Today is the best day ever. And even this morning we were talking about like how tired we are and this heaviness that I'm feeling, and I'm not sleeping well. And like, I know why I'm not sleeping well and I'm not doing anything about it. I need to go for a walk and like get rid of this restlessness. So even this morning when I woke up, I'm like, oh, work, like, and all those negative thoughts, and that's like a himsa, like they're like harmful thoughts to me, because to me, they're not real. Like, I don't want to feel that way all day. So like, I sat in bed for a minute, and this idea of bhavana, where it's like cultivating that soil around the seed. We talked about it yesterday, Ashley, like what Jafar was saying about it too. And it's like, no, I don't want to feel that way. Like, and I can put a smile on my face and say, today's the best day ever. I don't have to plan my whole day. I can just say, today's the best day ever. I'm going to go join sadhana. I'm going to like change my frequency. Like, and it's, for me, like, I don't have all these yoga thoughts in my head when I'm doing this. It's not like I'm going to go from tamasic to sattvic right now, but like, I don't want to feel heavy. I want to feel light. So like, what one thing can I do in this moment to make me feel better? So I played a word game on my phone and I gave myself like 3 minutes to play the word game. And I got up and I started my routine. But I love that mantra of just catching yourself when you're spiraling and just being like, today's the best day ever.
Yeah. And sometimes it can feel like too much of a jump to like you won't always like, you can't always go from a state of like being stressed out to saying that and then you feel magically better. But sometimes it's like you do have to reach for something that's like a little bit out of reach when you're in that state of spiral. And that's why I love this chart, because say you're angry, you're existing down here in this anger level. Like you can crawl up, you know, you don't have to make a giant leap all the way to the top necessarily, but you can crawl and you can say, you know, what is an emotion that makes me, or what's a thought that helps me feel more neutral about this situation? Sometimes neutralizing a bad thought is a good starting point. Like sometimes if I'm really, really, really angry at someone, I can't just automatically go to like a loving thought towards them. And sometimes I need to reach neutrality first. And then I can, you know, move forward from there. So
yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead. No. Go ahead.
I love that neutrality. And I think for me, I've trained myself, and it's just a matter of what you train yourself on. Like I train myself that today is the best day ever. That's more my neutral. Because I practice that even when I'm high or even when I'm low. So that to me like pulls me back to the neutral state. It's not like tricking myself to put a smile on my face and go about my day. It's just like trying to like, yeah, exactly, bring me back to that neutral state so that I could really check in and really, even yesterday, I was so cranky yesterday because I was hungry. This whole thing and like, and I have these days where I get like this, and I said to my friend, I'm like, I just want to be cranky, like, and I just let myself be cranky. Like we can't always live up here. Like we have to, but in that crankiness, I was like, I can't be mean. I'm not going to talk bad. I'm like, I'm just going to let myself be cranky in the comfort of my own home until I get my food.
Can I offer some? Oh.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, finish, and then I'll offer.
I felt like, you know, like how a little baby is like, I ate my sandwich and now I'm like, I need a nap. Like I felt like that whole thing where like a baby throws a temper tantrum crying. I'm like, it's exactly the same idea.
Mm-hmm. I was going to offer what I do to get myself to that neutral point is like, whenever I catch myself saying, why is this happening to me? Or I'll say something like, why is it always me? You know, whenever that quality of question comes in my brain, then I know like immediately I have to switch this to, what can I learn from this? What is this teaching me? What is this really about? Like what's underneath this thought? And then that frees me from the like that victimhood or that like down on myself. And I move from like heavy, like it's like what you're saying, you don't go from like, oh, I feel so bad and now I feel so good. I go from like, oh, I feel so bad to curious. And then from curious, it might go to like, oh, now I have a little space around this. And then little by little, it might take a few days, but it's like, oh, now I have a little clarity. Now I have a more understanding. So I switch whenever there's a question in my head and the question is like, why me, poor me kind of quality of question, then I go, what is this teaching me? Or what is this thing trying to teach me? What is this thing trying to show me? And then at least, I may not feel better, but at least I'm out of the anger or I'm out of the sadness. I'm out of the heaviness and into like a curious state.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's the practice of rewriting your ego's story. Because when you, especially, I get that way too, when you get in this thing, like, why does this always happen to me? But it's like, why does it always happen to me?
It's me.
Because you expect it to, because you are viewing things through this lens that this always happens to me. And how long have you been telling that story? And when you start to ask those questions, you start to figure out, you know, what's real and what's not real, what is just part of the story that's playing itself out in your brain versus what's reality, and getting curious about what is actually going on, you know, outside of your emotional experience of whatever is happening.
So, Pam, what you said like really resonates with me. And what I normally do, or what I've learned to do, because I didn't always do that, remembering that it's just a season, like maybe it could be a day, maybe it's a couple hours, maybe it's a whole week. Like, all right, I'm in this crappy, shitty space, and it's okay. I just gotta be aware that this is how I'm feeling, like not take it out on anyone, and just read through it. And at some point, maybe tomorrow or maybe by Thursday, it'll be gone. And it helps a lot, like knowing that, just remembering that it's not going to be like this forever.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm putting my books back together, right? And I just had this in my hand, and I don't know why I opened it, because I was just putting stuff away. But amazingly enough, this is the card that flipped, and it wasn't the top one. It's just what I grabbed. And it says, when every thought absorbs your attention completely, when you are so identified with the voice in your head and the emotions that accompany it, that you lose yourself in every thought and every emotion, then you are totally identified with form and therefore in the grip of the ego.
Which is exactly what we were just saying. We're in the flow state. We're having synchronicities.
Well, and I really feel like this whole COVID thing, like I have been feeling in that flow. Like I feel, and I think all those vibrations things are true. And I really feel like that's how we're going to heal, is like I try to keep myself there if it's true to me, because I really feel that's how the healing is going to happen. I mean, not curing COVID, obviously, but like healing each other, like mentally through this, even if you never even had COVID.
Pam, 100%. I feel like it's that idea that I am a drop in the ocean, and that when if I allow my drop in the ocean to be in wellness, to be supported, to be in the space that healing is possible, happiness is possible, peace for all people, justice for all people is possible. If I'm a drop in the ocean, and the drop that I contribute to the ocean is one of peace and love and freedom, then the ocean has more peace and love and freedom. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it is impossible. I feel like this experiment that Ashley shared with us is saying the same thing. Like, consciousness is consciousness, and when you come up that scale, all things are possible there. Like, who's to say first of all that this is not just wait, let me see if I can say it right. Who's to say that all of this is just not in my mind, that I have not created this with my own mind, that we collectively have not COVID, just our existence with our mind. And so if I tap into that center of my mind, where there's pure consciousness, where this omega exists, then who's to say that I can't also create the healing of the planet? Like, I don't think that's too far-fetched anymore. So anyway, I just wanted to say I agree with you 100%. Like, this is how our healing comes. It comes because I allow it to come. And when I allow it to come into my own heart, my own space, my own relationships, my own family, then it becomes available out there in the world.
And I think, like, Adriana just triggered something, a thought for me. Like, I think it's okay or possible, only because I've experienced it for myself, to have, let's say, and I'm only going to share this because I know I'm moving into this phase this week. So let's say I'm carrying grief with me. Instead of looping it with fear and guilt and shame, I can say, you know what, I'm moving into grief this week, but let me pair it with peace and joy, so that I can have this, like, carry this 75 frequency, but also maybe like it'll be really more like a 50, and then I'll carry joy and it'll be more like a 400. You know, like being aware of being, it's okay to have the bottom parts too. Like, we're gonna, like, not not even know, like just knowing the bottom parts are going to happen in life, like, but it's okay. They can be paired with the top part instead of looping, like getting the guilt and shame and then carrying anger around with you too. Like have guilt and shame, but carry reason or love around with you.
Yeah, and I think like a core of this teaching is that awareness, like what Micheline was talking about. Like you can't do any of this work without acknowledgement and awareness of when you are in the lower states. Like you have to have that, because what he's saying is that everyone does have that. Like even the most experienced practitioners can still fall into those states. And after enough practice, it becomes easier that your natural state is just ahimsa all the time and it's all good. But until you get there, it really is a practice of being aware of what your state is and inviting other things to be along there with it, so that you don't have to, spiral and create.
Pam, I'm sorry, Ashley.
No, go ahead.
Pam, I'm so glad you said that, because I think it's all about and all a part, like validating the emotions within us, because I feel like a lot of times if we are feeling fearful or anger or grief, we feel shame about it because the thoughts are like, oh, I should feel better, or I hate feeling like this, and it just creates more of the shame. But like you said, like I want to feel cranky, I'm going to feel cranky, like own it. But I can feel cranky and feel like I'm owning my crankiness, which maybe is like moving up the chart, instead of feeling like, you know what, I'm feeling cranky and it's just like my whole day is ruined now because I'm feeling cranky, and moving down.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly.
And I also wanted to talk about it, like, I know we're kind of running out of time, but when it's another person in your, who like, say you live with someone and they're in a really bad mood, or like something's wrong with them, right? So if you meet them where they are in a state of anger, or you try to guilt them, or like you're trying to, impose this change based on how you feel around them, and now you're both caught in a cycle of like not feeling good. Have you ever experienced it where you approached this person with love or with kindness, and it kind of brought them a little bit higher than they were? Not necessarily out of their funk, but just maybe a little bit higher. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So we do have this power to influence what's around us, not by wanting necessarily to change it, but even by just directing our own attention and energy in a specific way. Does that make sense?
100%.
Even just being neutral. I mean, like even just being neutral to them and just like kind of letting them,
allowing them.
Yeah, is gonna move them up. And then when they kind of get closer to neutral, then you can even go higher.
Yeah. So yesterday, this happened because James was just like in a mood, like he was just having a day, and he was just like in a bad mood, and he kind of got in an argument with his dad earlier in the day. So it's like there's nothing I can do to change the fact that he feels shitty right now, but just allowing him to like feel shitty for a little while, and just like, bringing him a plate of food or like something, doing something nice, like within a couple hours he was, out of that. Whereas if we both got angry, like if I got angry at him being angry, and then like we, it would have been like a whole big mess. But instead, like sometimes you just have to like allow other people and like slowly, it's always concentrating on your own vibration, which has the power to influence what's happening even to other people outside of you. And I think that can even be said the other way around. If like you're around somebody, if you're unpracticed in something like this, and then you're around somebody who's constantly really negative, like you might feel constantly brought down by that person if you don't have a practice of cultivating something else inside yourself. Okay, with that, I think we will move to meditation if you guys are ready.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's come to a comfortable seat. We'll start with some rounds of alternate nostril breathing. So taking the index and middle finger to the center of the right palm. We'll close off the right nostril with the thumb, left with the ring finger. Let's take a big deep inhale through both. And exhale through both. Covering the right nostril, breathing in through the left. Holding close the left. Exhale through the right. Inhaling through the right. Exhale through the left. Inhale through the left. Exhale through the right. Inhale through the right. Exhale through the left. Inhale through the left. Exhale through the right. Inhale through the right. Exhale through the left. Inhale through the left. Exhale through the right. Inhale through the right. Exhale through the left. Moving through a few more rounds of that on your own. And then settling in for your meditation.